Focus today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and of course, all eyes on the Middle East, as well as coming up to Alaska. That'll be tomorrow. But in the meantime, the Middle East is still a hot spot, and I am so honored when we have time to sit down with Kenneth Abramowitz. He's the author of Multifront War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife. He's the managing general partner and co-founder of NGN Capital. He also has been a contributor to various organizations that are fighting to protect Israel and America from political Islam and the radical left. He's the author of a fascinating read called theWest.com, and that's the founder, excuse me. There's a picture of the book, The Multifront War. His website is the SaveTheWest.com, and there's a picture of the landing page, so you can check that out. Kenneth, good to see you again, friend. How are you?
Yeah, great to be with you as always.
Thank you. Perfect timing, too. So much going on. I'm just kind of curious. As you know, Australia now is joining the UK, France, Canada, and others in trying to recognize a Palestinian state. I don't know what your take is on that, but is this an attempt of these countries trying to isolate the U.S.?
Well, there's a lot of factors going on in their heads, so I just have to guess. There's internal politics going on with each country. Each country has 5 or 10% of their population is Muslim, and I think they think that by announcing that they want a Palestinian state, that'll help them. As you know, in a democracy, usually victory is determined by 1 or 2 percentage points. So maybe they figure if they can get most of that 5 or 10% to vote for them, that would allow them to win in an election. That's one issue. Another issue is perhaps they're getting paid money from Qatar in particular or Iran. That's number 2. And number 3, maybe they're getting threatened by Qatar and Iran that they're going to activate their killer cells within their country and make life difficult. So those would be my 3 best guesses.
Wow. What about, say, in the case of the UK, where their Islamic population has grown to what it is, where they're allowed to practice Sharia law in certain areas? Is this an attempt to just appease them?
Yes. I guess you could make that number 4. It's interrelated with issue number 1. You know, how to get votes from a population that doesn't share your values. So what you do is you jettison your values and you accept their values, and that's worrisome too. I mean, all of those countries have made the same mistake. They, by the way, we made the same mistake too. So it's not like they were alone or we were alone. Unlimited immigration of unvetted people, illegal, mostly illegals, number 1. And number 2, non-deportation of people who are troublemakers. Or as I say, anyone who announces that I'm a member of an Islamo-Nazi death cult, I would say, great, here's your free ticket out of this country. So they're now suffering as a result. Now, President Trump has publicly said just in the last couple of weeks, Europe, follow us. We stopped illegal immigration, number 1, and number 2, we're deporting bad guys. You have to do that too. It's just that they're not listening just yet to President Trump. I know how they can listen, but so far they're not listening.
Okay. Before I let this subject go, so I can't help but think, with Australia's move now joining UK, France, Canada, that it's emboldened Hamas.
Yes, and Secretary of State Rubio publicly said just a few days ago that the negotiations between Israel and Hamas broke down as those countries announced that they believe in a Palestinian state, that all of a sudden Hamas became extra intransigent, and there's no deal. So yes, they're hurting the hostages, they're hurting Israel. By the way, they're hurting themselves. They're not acting in their own self-interest, and that provokes a whole number of different questions. Why aren't they acting in their own self-interest?
Yeah. All right, so in the meantime, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a pretty stormy speech yesterday there at the Newsmax gathering in Jerusalem, and basically saying, and I'm paraphrasing, no two states. The United States is saying no two states, and they're continuing to say the elimination of Hamas. Now, the stumbling block is the remaining hostages. So as the circle gets smaller and smaller inside Gaza, going after Hamas, at what point do you think it costs the lives of the remaining hostages?
Well, look, there's no good solution to this mess. So Israel basically has two choices. One is to unconditionally surrender to Hamas and give them everything they want. So in other words, leave Gaza. Israel would have to evacuate 60,000 people who live in the south of Israel near Gaza, and basically announce unconditional surrender, which they're not going to do. And the other choice is go in and find them. So I think they're going to go in and find them. Now, it provokes the next question: will they find them living or dead? And the point is, if they do nothing right now, or other than negotiate with someone intransigent, they're all going to be dead due to starvation.
Yeah.
So I would say if they maintain the status quo, they're all dead. So you might as well go in and look for them, and at least try to save as many of the 20 as humanly possible.
In the meantime, they're fighting this propaganda war, Israel is, of starving the Palestinians, in spite of the fact that there's visual evidence that's not the case, and they're doing everything they can to get food to them, and Hamas continues to steal that. Do you think sooner or later that breaks through the headlines, or is it deliberately being covered up?
Well, right now it's deliberately being covered up. And so the only people starving in Gaza are the hostages. And notice that nobody cares about the hostages. So they care about the 1.5 million non-starving Gazans, but not the 20 starving Israeli hostages. So it's pretty pathetic. My very low respect for those four countries just went lower, as if it could go lower. And it's just despicable what's happening. So Israel has to learn how to do a better job fighting. I call it cultural warfare. You can call it information warfare. You can call it public relations. But Israel has to do a better job. And by the way, so does America, and so does every democracy. Mm-hmm. Democracies are not good at fighting cultural wars. Bad guys are great at fighting cultural wars. And that's because they're organized to do that with a minister of propaganda. We don't have a minister of propaganda. I would call it minister of truth, a minister of cultural preservation. So there's other words than minister of propaganda, because we tell the truth and they lie. And so we all have a deficiency on this score.
You have expressed that so well in the past, and I appreciate that. And that does bring up an interesting question. Why hasn't the president, even though he has strong support for Israel, why hasn't the president gone to the press and said, look, Hamas is stealing the aid that's going there? Why hasn't the president picked up Netanyahu's defense of what's really going on inside Gaza?
Well, there's a few things that are required, but let's say, to make it simple, let's say two things. If President Trump called me, just pretend, or Prime Minister Netanyahu, it's the same response. Number one, you, Mr. Leader, you're the best spokesperson that each country has. Use your microphone, raise your voice, start attacking, not physically, that's for the military, start verbally attacking the enemies much in a much more powerful way. So that's a comment for both of them. The second thing, if they were here, just pretend, I would say, and hire someone really, really smart, really, really good to be your Secretary of Cultural Preservation. That's the best term I have for it. And hire, just to give you an example, Newt Gingrich or Mark Levin. Just pretend that they were willing to do the job. These are people with high level of intelligence, they can convey the wonderfulness of America. And Israel needs two people, well, you'd only hire one person of that type of caliber to fight the cultural war. This is a battle of brains and words. And you need the best and the brightest to fight this war and complement the abilities of the president or the prime minister, because they have 1,000 things to do. They can't spend their whole day talking to television, radio, and internet and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. A great suggestion. One other question before I take a break. I want to come back to these countries, especially Australia now, because the prime minister there says the move is, to protect human rights and stuff like that. Why hasn't somebody said to Australia, the UK, France, Canada, why don't you divide your country into two states and let these people have existence in your backyard?
Well, let's expand upon the point that I just mentioned. If you actually had a Secretary of Cultural Preservation, in Israel they call Minister of Cultural Preservation, this person is an attack dog. Okay, so this person would say it's easier for this person to say than for the president to say. This person would say, yes, okay, you four countries, you want a Palestinian state, go set one up. You have a big country. What are you waiting for, you morons? You do it if that's what you believe. That's a way of fighting. Now, another thing this Secretary of Cultural Preservation would say, you four countries, you're systemically human rights violators. You are violating the rights every day of the 90% of your population that's Christian and the 1% that's Jewish. And you're protecting the 9% that are Muslim. You cannot continue to undermine Christianity and Judaism and disrespect the rights of 90% of your population, and then go to the next stage. And I'm going to advise the president to start putting sanctions on you, because we do not like to have, so to speak, allies who are human rights violators like you.
Beautiful. So do you think Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now at that line in the sand that they have to go in and finish the job?
I think he's come to that conclusion. I mean, that's the logical conclusion. It's uncomfortable because, as you know, when you're the leader of your country, you're responsible for everybody. So you're responsible for the 20 hostages that are living. You're responsible for the remains of the 30 who are not living. You're also responsible for your soldiers who are fighting. And you have to make trade-offs. And there's no wonderful trade-off. But if you do nothing or maintain the status quo, the 20 will be dead. So that's unacceptable. Status quo is unacceptable. So therefore, you have no choice, and try to find them and kill the bad guys faster than they can kill the good guys, and hopefully some of the 20 can come back through brute force.
Yeah. One last question, Kenneth, and that is, why have we let Iran just sit there idle? You know they're reloading. Why are we allowing this to happen?
Well, I love President Trump, but if I were him, I would not have called for a ceasefire after day 12 of that 12-day war. Iran was on its heels. The regime was tottering. Israel was just about to send another planes to blow up another batch of targets. President Trump told them to stop and not do that. I think that was a mistake. I think he got bad advice, whether it's from his own staff or whether it was from someone like Qatar, and stop the war in the 7th inning. And I don't think you should stop wars in the 7th inning. Can you imagine if Franklin Roosevelt said, oh, it's 1944, there's so many dead people, I'm tired of all the killing, let's have a ceasefire with Germany. Hello, how about unconditional ceasefire, unconditional surrender with Germany? And so that's what we needed with Iran. It'll happen again, by the way. Within 6 months, Israel, perhaps even 3 months, Israel will be attacking Iran because it can't allow them to rearm and just prepare for the next bigger battle. And so the war is, call it, if it were a play, I'd call it intermission, so to speak, between Act 1 and Act 2.
All right. Let me take a quick break. Check out Kenneth Abramowitz's website, savethewest.com, and certainly get a copy of his book called The Multifront War. There's a picture of the cover. And check out the website, savethewest.com. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. It's always an honor to have with us Kenneth Abramowitz. He's the author of The Multifront War, and he manages a website and the founder of SaveTheWest.com. And there's a picture of the cover of the book, and there's a picture of his landing page. Again, Kenneth, thank you for your time. I value it greatly. You're really such a great thinker, and you help us think good, too. I want to move your attention to the big meeting tomorrow. And they're already saying they're calling for meeting number 2. So that's hopefully to de-emphasize some major things happening for meeting number 1 with President Putin and President Trump. I think there's a couple things we have to keep in mind here is that this meeting is happening because President Putin requested it, but it is happening in the United States. That means Putin is willing to leave Moscow and come to Alaska. And there's so much on this one. I don't know. Let me just stop here. What's your initial take on this?
Well, I think President Putin was logical to want to have a meeting with Trump. I think Trump was logical to agree to it. I thought the place that they picked, which is always very important in political circles, was good. I'm not a big fan of having the two of them meeting in Saudi Arabia or something like that. What does Saudi Arabia have to do with this? Yeah. So this is an issue between America and Ukraine versus Putin. And so I think so far, so good. I'm hoping that their staffs, both President Trump and President Putin, have done 90% of the work. In other words, the last thing you need is a shout, this wonderful meeting, and then everyone yells at each other and threatens each other. That's pretty dysfunctional. So hopefully the staffers have come to some agreements about something so that the meeting at least can be called a success from both countries' point of view. They obviously cannot resolve all the issues. The gap is too wide between what Ukraine wants and what Russia wants. So if the staff did their work, there'll be at least some things of positive nature. And your point about discussing a second meeting is very wise by the organizers because the gaps are wide. And it'll take a lot of arm twisting, particularly Russia, to get those gaps to close.
All right, so there seems to be some obvious things on the table. Ukraine is not allowed to join NATO. It's still going to be in question as to whether or not they join the UN. And eastern Ukraine, probably portions of that land will go to Russia. Or is that too wide of an assumption?
Well, I think everything you said are good guesses. Putin's not going to. Putin has almost 20%. There's certain portions of the 4 provinces, I think like another 10% left over. So they're debating, can I have the other 10%? The answer is no. So one logical compromise would be, okay, you keep what you have because we're not going to force you out. We're not going to war directly with Ukraine against Russia. So there's no one who's going to push you out of the, let's just pretend it's 18%. So, okay, fine. So you can have that. But in return, this is, and by the way, Ukraine would not be happy with that, but just pretend that they're happy with it. They're not happy, but let's pretend they'll accept it. But in return, we're not going to allow a demilitarized Ukraine that's not a part of NATO. So that when President Trump's no longer president and Putin, you're a dictator for life, if you live long enough, you'll politically outlive President Trump, and then you'll just invade Ukraine under another president. So no. If you're going to get the 18%, that's it. And they can join NATO. Maybe we won't have missiles there out of respect for Russia, but they'll be part of NATO. And so you will never get the other 82%. maybe that's the seeds of a compromise that could work.
Is rare earth going to be part of the bargaining chip here?
Well, in the 18% that pretend that Russia ends up stealing, I'm sure there's a lot of wheat there and a lot of rare earths, and I'm told natural gas. And so Russia would get their 18% of whatever is there, but Ukraine would have 82% of whatever is not there. So basically, they're dividing the pie up. It's not right. It's not fair. But with Russian troops there and no one wanting to push them out, that's the status quo, and that's would probably be the best that everyone could do. And by the way, then Ukraine could join the EU, European Union, could join NATO. There'd be some. You could call it NATO minus. In other words, NATO minus some capabilities to calm down Russia. So maybe that's the seeds of a negotiated settlement that they obviously can't do on their first meeting, but maybe they can set the seeds for that.
Do you think President Trump, using his business acumen, will say to President Putin, don't you really want some Western business to come back? Don't you want your Big Mac back? Don't you want Trader Joe's and Costco back? I mean, could he use that as an incentive?
Yes. Well, whenever you negotiate, there's, as we say, carrots and sticks. So on the carrot side, you just mentioned the good carrot. You can join Western civilization. You're part of Western civilization. You're a Christian country. You shouldn't be fighting. Christians shouldn't be fighting Christians. And so come to your senses. Rejoin Western civilization. You don't have to become a democracy, and we're not making you a democracy. But bring your business. Start looking west instead of looking east to China. That's a big, big carrot. Another big carrot is Russia's caused something like $500 billion of damage. On the carrot side, you can say, we're sitting on almost that amount of assets that we took from your bank accounts. We'll give it back to you. And so here's a few $100 billion. On the stick side, we're not going to give it back to you, and we're going to give it to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And we're going to punish you with extra sanctions. We're going to make life a living hell for you. So there's the right combination of carrots and sticks that perhaps can close the gaps.
Yeah, I can't help but think that the president still has sanctions and tariffs in his arsenal. Back to the eastern part of Ukraine just for a moment, because you never hear about this in the press. One of the great motives of taking over that real estate has to do with the Orthodox Church, doesn't it?
Well, yes, they're also, I mean, both sides are Christian, obviously, but they have different ways of looking at Christianity. And Putin looks at religion from a political point of view. In other words, political Christianity. In other words, Christian leaders who support him. And Ukraine wants Christian leaders that support Ukraine. So there's a guaranteed split between the two opinions of the role of the church. So, but again, under this theoretical compromise that I pretended that I created, then Russia will control the Christian churches in the 18%.
Yeah, okay.
And Ukraine will control the Christian churches in the other 82%. They won't like each other, but they are Christians, so they have more in common with each other than against each other.
Right.
And so that would be good. As I say, the Christians shouldn't be fighting Christians. And I don't like when Jews fight Jews. They should. We, Western civilization, should fight our real enemies, not ourselves.
Great point. So, at the end of the day, what happens to Zelensky? I mean, he's going to be forced to take whatever this deal is going to be. I mean, they're going to allow him to come to a meeting and talk a little bit. But does he really have the power to negotiate, number one? And number two, whatever they settle with, does he survive the next election in Ukraine?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a great question for both of them. In other words, both of them have the power to negotiate. But the next question is, do they have the power to stay in power after they negotiate. And so if one of them is perceived as a loser in their country, it can be the end of them. And Zelensky's publicly said, after I negotiate a deal, he's publicly said, I'm not an impediment to a deal. After we negotiate a deal, I'll step aside. But you know, with Russia, it's a little different. When you negotiate in a dictatorship, and you, in quotes, lose, whatever the definition of lose is, you can get killed. You know, it's not a question of, oh, I'm stepping aside, I'm going to retire, send my pension checks to the local city bank so I can take the money out of my ATM. No. The knives are out for you. So this can, the reason it's so treacherous for both of the leaders is they can end up dead, not just out of power, particularly Russia. So you can see why Putin is not enamored with giving a lot of concessions, because there's someone around him who has their knife out, either literally or figuratively, who says, we lost 1 million people to get 18% of Ukraine, and that's all we got. Putin's got to go. And they nominate themselves to make him go. So it's treacherous times for both leaders, particularly Putin.
All right, one last question. I want to swing you back to the isolation of countries against Israel to go to 2 states. Do you think President Trump, in the long run, puts pressure on, say, Australia, UK, France, and Canada for their involvement of suggesting a 2-state solution?
Yes, that's what I hope, and that's what I expect. And I have a half-serious joke, comment, let's just say, that President Trump can solve any problem in 5 minutes. In other words, he has much more power than he's using right today. He's got the biggest microphone in the world, and everyone's listening to him. And if he announced to those 4 countries, you're in big trouble, okay? You're supporting a terror organization to take over this fictional Palestinian state. By the way, the number 1 victim of a Palestinian state would be the Arabs who live there. Right. So you're basically condemning 1.5 million Arabs in Judea and Samaria and 1.5 million Gazans to be in a living prison. What kind of leaders are you? You're not protecting your own Christians and Jews. What kind of leaders are you? You're human rights violators. And I'm going to start distancing America from you. And again, carrots and sticks. But on the stick side, we're going to start sanctioning you. And we're going to, I personally would openly call for regime change in those countries. I would say we're going to be supporting your Republican equivalent opponents, and we want you out of power. That's what I would do. President Trump's not there yet, but I hope that he will be.
Why hasn't it been said that Gaza is a temporary two-state solution that failed?
It's not complicated. That's right. And so, but in politics, you can announce that this failed and I want to try it again. In business, can you imagine going to investors and saying, look, I have this failed investment. Would you mind investing more money in my failed investment? They say, hello, we're leaving. So this doesn't work in the business world, but it works in the political world for a reason beyond my abilities.
You're wonderful. Kenneth, thank you for your time. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out his website, savethewest.com, and certainly get a copy of his book. It answers a lot of things that we're talking about here. The Multifront War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, pandemics, and racial strife. And there's a picture of the cover on the book. Thank you, my friend. Look forward to more visits.
Anytime. Great to be with you.
Thank you.